Hello and welcome to LA Currents. I'm Saida Pagan. It's a problem that impacts thousands of Angelenos, most of them women, many of them children. Today the focus is on the fight against sex trafficking. And with us to discuss this issue is Asia Ragland, the program director of Two Wings. It's a nonprofit organization that helps survivors of sex trafficking, and Tika Thornton, a survivor advocate who herself is a survivor of sex trafficking. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Asia, let's begin by looking at the scope of the problem. Just how widespread is sex trafficking in Los Angeles?
It is estimated that there are around 10,000 victims of sex trafficking here in the Los Angeles area. Southern California is a major hub for trafficking, and this is of U.S. citizens. So often it is believed that sex trafficking happens overseas, or only foreigners are trafficked into the United States, but this happens in our very own backyard.
Is that right? Now, how much, I'm going to talk to Tika here, how much of this activity is in the open, on the street corner, and how much of it is behind closed doors and perhaps orchestrated by third parties seeking to make a profit?
Well, most of our clients that we talk to at Two Wings and other agencies, we have found that a lot of the domestic sex trafficking is out in the open. Now with the internet, it's also happening behind the scenes. After they closed down Backpage, they started to understand there were a lot other websites or escort sites that were available to the consumers or the Johns, as well as the victims and the girls. So that's a third party that it plays a part in it, as well as the traffickers and pimps. They often recruit young girls and guys into the life in hopes of a better life or to make monies.
Now, speaking of that, how does the typical victim, typical if you will, male or female or even a child, get pulled into this kind of activity?
Well, there's a few different ways that they're groomed into it. The most common is a boyfriend. A boyfriend usually, goes about the regular courting, you're beautiful, I would like to get to know you better, and then something will change. It could be that the boyfriend will say that I can't pay for my place anymore, and if I can't pay for my place, I will have to leave the state. And then the girl is usually frantic, what can I do? And then that's when he will introduce trading sex for monies in order for him to stay. They will usually say it's only going to happen one time, but as we know, it happens multiple times. And then the next thing that she knows, she's full-blown into sex trafficking. That is just one way. Or it could be that they come from a marginalized, poverty-stricken area, and they are looking for money to take care of their family, or they're looking for money so they can be able to go to school or go forward in life in some kind of way. And they will think that engaging into sex acts would help them out, but it's just, it's a never-ending routine that happens, and so they end up looking for security. They will go to a trafficker or a well-known pimp for security or just for guidance or for help, and then they are stuck in it that way as well.
Asia, what about the children, very young children? Tell us about that.
So the average age of a child coerced into modern-day slavery or sex trafficking is 13 years old. And as Tika mentioned, oftentimes these children, young boys and girls, come from family situations where either their relatives are also prostitutes or pimps, or are no longer available to them to protect them and to watch for them. They're working, whatever it may be. So the kids are left to their own devices, and so they get caught up in a bad group, or like Tika mentioned too, they're easily swayed. And a lot of these young girls are looking for a father figure. And here comes a boy that's a couple of years older than them and starts to groom them.
So let's talk about the dangers of sex trafficking, not only for the victims themselves, but for the communities where these activities are going on.
So the dangers for the victims themselves, I mean, their lives are at danger because they are objectified from the get-go. They are no longer seen as a human being and just as a commodity, not only from the pimp's point of view, but from the Johns as well. So they're constantly getting beaten by both parties. They are drugged so they can endure whatever it is that they are told or forced to do. They are stripped away from their families, which, like I've mentioned before, maybe they've wanted to escape those family situations to begin with. So their mental health is at stake too, constantly being manipulated, beat down mentally, verbally abused. And a lot of these kids, or a lot of these women, came from abusive families as well. So the abuse just continues on. And it, like Tika mentioned as well, it becomes a vicious cycle.
Mm-hmm. And what about the communities? I'm sure that this attracts a lot of other types of crime. Yes. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, if you will?
Yes, well, the community's concerns are very valid. A lot of times girls try to escape their traffickers and or pimps, and they still are working in the same areas where prostitution is known. And that could bring a lot of violence if the pimp or if the any person that's a part of his organization sees her. It could be met with gun violence. It could be met with physical violence, and that puts a strain on the community as well. There's a lot of traffic that are going on in that areas at all times of the night, which can also affect the community. And not to mention the children that are living in those areas, they are seeing this and it's very normalized. And they start to believe that this is okay. Mm-hmm. So that are the main issues that I see when talking to community members that are affected with human trafficking in their area.
And this next question is for both of you. How difficult is it for victims to break away from this lifestyle? Let's start with Asia.
It's incredibly difficult. Oftentimes, you know, when one of our participants in the past, when she was actually able to escape, oftentimes they go right back. And there's that vicious cycle again. It is because they have been so mentally manipulated that they feel like that is their family. They know that they're getting beaten, but then they start to feel like that's just commonplace. They know that it doesn't feel right to sell themselves, but that's just commonplace. And then it could be a John that hit them a little too hard, or a particular situation that forces them to flee. And then hopefully they join or are found and are able to join an agency, like Tika works for Journey Out, and they can join an agency, and then that's when we get the clients. But that is oftentimes, you know, even after they go through our program, sometimes they go back to the life as well. Mm-hmm.
Tika, tell us about the stories that you hear. Obviously no names, but the stories. Mm-hmm.
Yes, well, most of the population that we at Journey Out work with are 18 and over. And what we have found is that the average age that are coming into our drop-in center that are seeking resources are usually between the ages of like 24 and 28, but they have started in the life at an average age of 16 years old. So this is something that has been going on for years before we've actually got a hold of them into our organization. And they come from a life of trauma. So it's kind of hard to break them away from someone who they believe loves them and that are there to take care of them, because they don't really understand what that looks like. Because in the home, they had a very toxic environment. So it was easy, and it's sad to say this, but it was easy for them to get manipulated or groomed into the life. A few people that come into our agency have also been exploited by family members, and because of a drug habit that their mother had, or because, you know, they are from out of the country and this is a quick way for them to make money to feed the rest of the family members that aren't old enough or able to take care of themselves. So The face of human trafficking, especially sex trafficking here in California, there's no cookie cutter. There's no one size fits all. It could be a little bit of everything, anything that you can imagine when it comes down to society or you think of in movies. All these things actually play out in real life, and we just here to make sure that they have a safe place to bond with people to have support, and people that actually believe in them, even if they don't believe in themselves.
Let's turn the conversation now to your organization and what you do. First of all, how did Two Wings get its name, and how does it reach out to the survivors of sex trafficking?
So Two Wings derives from our motto, which is every bird has two wings, hope and courage. So our clients bring the courage and we provide the hope that lets them soar. So our organization, in the beginning, worked primarily with survivors of sex trafficking. We've now expanded our populations to include women at risk of trafficking. These populations include those that are formerly incarcerated, survivors of domestic violence, and those that were previously homeless. And oftentimes our clients fit into every single category. So what we do at Two Wings, we offer a career development academy and a youth mentoring program. And our career development academy is a 3-month program that we offer 3 times a year. The group that starts together is the group that ends together, so that they're able to form a strong support group within their group as well as with Two Wings and our volunteers. So the classes are career preparation and life skills training courses. So it's 36 classes on how to build a resume, which is intimidating to anyone, but especially intimidating to someone who's never had real work experience before. So we partner with a recruiting agency who comes in and helps them build a really strong resume. We have financial literacy classes. Tika can speak to this. It's one of her favorite classes. Oftentimes our participants love this. This budgeting class, they are taught how to open up a checking account, a savings account. They're taught how to budget, pay off debt, what have you. And maybe it's because you have control over your own money now.
Yeah.
And then we have computer literacy classes, which is so important, of course, because that's how we navigate the world. So we help them create a professional email address, which oftentimes they do not have a professional email address. We teach them how to navigate Google Drive, how to navigate Excel and Word. And then we offer self-defense classes, which our women really, really love. We have 6 writing courses, from how to compose a professional email to a potential employer to spoken word and poetry classes. We also teach speech writing classes. Many of our participants, like Tika, want to become an advocate, and that includes a lot of public speaking. So they are asked and taught to write a speech in our classes and then give this speech at the graduation that we hold for them at the end of the term. So our goal by the end of this 3 months is to make sure that our participants have clearly identified which career path or continued education they would like to pursue after our program.
Tell us a little bit more about the path to recovery and how long it can take.
The path to recovery, it's based off of the individual. What we consider successes could be something small for one client and something huge for another. It's just a matter of perception. For a client to come in who has been in the life for over 10 years, for her to stop being on the streets one day less, we celebrate that. For someone to get away from the prostitution part of it and just engage in dancing, we celebrate that. We look for what makes them feel good about themselves. They have come from such a controlled environment. We do not want to be another controlled environment. As far as the Two Wings program, we ask them, what do you want? What do you want for your future? Where do you see yourself in a year? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because we want to make sure that we are planting the seed for their own dreams and goals. It's not what we want, it's what the girls want.
Aisha, tell us a little bit about your partnership with law enforcement.
So we actually don't work directly with law enforcement, but we work directly with Tika, who works directly with law enforcement. So she can speak more to that.
Yes, so through Two Wings, after I graduated from Two Wings, I want to say almost 3 years ago, I there was a job notice that the ED founder, Lena, had put out, and it was for an organization called Journey Out, which is they have a prostitution diversion program that is recognized by the city attorney's office. And our ED, she's a retiring LAPD sergeant herself. She took over Mary Magdalene Project and coined it now Journey Out. And I work as a crisis response case manager. I work very closely with LAPD in the stations. And when they're doing sting operations, I'm the one that's in the tanks talking to the girls, letting them know about our services, letting them know about the prostitution diversion program, about our connection with Two Wings, and being a living testimony of it. Going into Two Wings as a woman who wasn't really sure of her future, and now sitting on the board and letting them know about how amazing the program was. And sometimes I'm very transparent to let them know that at first I wasn't taking it very seriously to write out a resume. Like, I know how to do that. You know, I thought that I had the skills already and I didn't need to go through this type of program. But once I started to go through the Two Wings program, I started to understand that what I learned was basic. It was just, hello, how are you doing? This is my resume. This is my application. Thank you. Have a good day. And it's so much more than that. As far as asking open-ended questions, to really do research about the organization that you're trying to be a part of, and really making yourself shine. We, as survivors of human trafficking, we have been through the worst parts of our lives in the past. After the recovery stage, we are very resilient. There's absolutely nothing that we can't do. And Two Wings make sure that they instill that in us. So we have the confidence when going into a job interview to ace the job interview, get that job, and live a happy and productive life.
Yes. I'd like to address this question to both of you. What about other partnerships, such as with health services organizations, education, businesses? Does the community also support you, those other aspects of the community?
Yeah, we actually partner with a number of agencies. It's quite a large collective, the Human Traffic Task Force meetings, where we actually are able to network and establish those relationships. So we work with, or it is required that all of our participants see a therapist once a week. And so if they come in with a therapist, that's wonderful. If not, we do recommend them to a number of services. Specifically or recently, the YWCA, our participants have really loved the therapist there downtown. We also partner with Dwell Collaborative. They're an occupational therapy program. So after our participants graduate our program, they are then encouraged or able to enroll in another 3-month program with Esther at the Dwell Collaborative. And I'll let Tika speak a little bit more about the Dwell Collaborative because she loves it so much.
Yes, this process of being a part of Two Wings, I thought it was just going to be a 12-week program, but it's so much more than that. We also have an alumni chapter that we have a closed Facebook group, and we're able to talk about certain issues that might come around. It kind of turned into a sisterhood, kind of like a sorority type of thing, because we're actually there to make sure that we have each other's backs and that we're supporting each other through every level of our recovery. But then I got a surprise, and we have another 12-week program that's afterwards called Dwell Collaborative. Now, at first, I'm just thinking that we're just supposed to be there to play with glitter and make dream catchers and have a good time. But Two Wings gives us the skills to acquire the job, where Dwell keeps us accountable for certain goals that we meet in our lives. And a lot of people don't really understand what occupational therapy was. I know I didn't, but it's necessary, because you need someone that's going to be that little bird on your shoulder to say, remember you said you were going to do this? Well, what steps do you need? Do you need any help for us? What research do you need to do in order to reach that goal? And that's why Two Wings and Dwell Collaborative is a great marriage, especially for survivors like myself.
Aisha, you mentioned that you really didn't know too much about sex trafficking before you got involved. what was one thing that you found out that was new for you that you couldn't have imagined you would find out?
Well, one, finding out that it exists right here in my own backyard, and how prevalent it is in our small city. That sex trafficking is happening at music events, at big sporting events. It is happening in low-income communities as well as affluent areas. It is happening on Rodeo Drive. It's happening in Compton. I didn't realize that it was, like I mentioned, so prevalent right around me.
And Tika, I'd like to ask you the same question. As you work with the survivors, what is something that you did not know?
Well, one thing that's shocking to me is that they don't understand that they are victims. And then I started to think about my own story. I did not find out that I was a victim of human trafficking or a victim of anything until I was 33 years old. So I started in the life at the age of 12, got out of the life at the age of 23, and now here I am at 33 years old, and someone's telling me that I was a victim and I wasn't a criminal. And that's what a lot of the victims think. They think that they're more of criminals because they're engaging in prostitution, not understanding that the grooming process and having someone over them is victimization. So I think that's amazing as well. And what I've also learned is that people need to be more understanding. People need to be more empathetic. If they start to ask what happened to you instead of what's wrong with you, they will understand the stories behind these women, children, and also men and boys that have been victimized through human trafficking.
What do you think we can do to change society's attitudes about sex trafficking?
Education. Watching this show, doing your research. I think it's, before I started volunteering with Two Wings back in 2012, I didn't know that human trafficking or sex trafficking was a domestic issue. When I tell my friends what it is that I do, they didn't know. So it's still very much, and I think this term sex trafficking is still very much a new term that not everyone is aware of. So it's just having these conversations and spreading the word that it is very much a real domestic issue that we face.
And finally, Tika, what would you say to a young man or a young woman who is currently in the situation that you might have been in a few years ago?
I would like for them to know that I am a living testimony. There is life after tragedy. There is life after trauma. I am no one special. If I can be in the place that I'm in now, anyone can do it. Just sometimes it takes for you to humble yourself and to really understand who you are, and that takes a lot of time, a lot of self-reflection. And once that's done, do whatever it is that you want to do in your life. You deserve to be happy. It's okay for you to fail at certain things once you're trying other things. Just be patient and take your time, and you're worthy.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Thank you for your organization, your contribution to the community, and for providing such valuable information for all of us here. Asia Ragland and Tika Thornton of Two Wings, a nonprofit organization that helps survivors of sex trafficking. And I want to thank you for joining us for LA Currents. I'm Saida Pagan.